Hi everyone, welcome to Papa's Workshop. Well, today I'm putting together this Neptune 3 Plus by Elegoo. This is a much larger printer than what I've had in the past. This bed is 320 by 320 millimeters, which gives you a much larger print area. So this is the printer for you if you like printing large items or if you want to print multiple items at one time. Rather than do the typical unboxing, I went ahead and got everything out of the box, and now I can show it to you all laid out on the table. Of course, you have the bed here. It's really pre-assembled, and this portion with the gantry and the vertical portion, again, is all assembled. Of course, you get all the various tools and the materials that you need to be able to assemble this, and as you can see, there's not many items, and everything is clearly labeled with the different bags and exactly what's in the bags. This build is an extremely easy process. They have a manual that has the complete instructions, but quite frankly, there's not a lot of instruction that's needed to be able to assemble this Neptune 3 Plus printer. To install the vertical parts, you can see that it has an indentation right here in the base, and that vertical mount goes right into that slot, and it's of course identified on both sides, snaps in position, and you're ready to put in the screws. Now there's a total of 4 screws, 2 on each side, and it's the HM545 screw. And you just turn it over on its side, slip these screws in, and you can just about hand tighten these all the way down, and you know that it's fitting nice and secure with that pre-positioned slot that it drops into. There's no guesswork. You're going to have it perfectly positioned. I always like to put in all of the screws first and just loosely tighten them up. And then once that is done, then I take the wrench and tighten everything down. That way, if there's any movement or shifting that I need to make to be able to have the screw lined up, I can easily do that before the screws are tightened. And this way, it makes it where a simple operation, quite frankly, is even simpler. But I'm going to tighten up all 4 of these screws, and believe it or not, that's the majority of the assembly. That's the biggest component that needs to go onto this machine. On the right-hand side of the machine, you have 3 holes that are drilled and tapped. The screws that's going to go in there are the PM420s, and there's, of course, 3 of them. Now, this is going to hold the bracket that will hold the controller. And, of course, this is magnetic, just like the Neptune 3 Pro. And that will just screw right into there. Again, this is not a complicated process. And with those 3 screws put into place, you can put the controller on there. Again, it's magnetic, and then just plug in the controller right into its slot. And that portion is completed. Let's move on now to the filament holder. Again, this is real simple. This is just where you can screw this in. Everything's already threaded. And once that's done, the little T-nuts are already installed on top of the gantry. And of course, you have a little bag with the screws in it. And you guessed it, they're clearly labeled the PM418. And of course, there's 2 pieces. Now that that's in, let's get the filament detector on. Now this has just 1 screw that needs to go into this, and this is mounted at the base of the filament holder, and it has the threaded insert already mounted. You screw that in, and again, just that simple, it's done. It's almost as if I didn't even need to do a video on this whole process because it is literally just that simple. However, don't leave yet, because there are a couple of places that you're going to need some help with, and I want you to stick around and make sure that you see what you need to be able to do to make sure that this machine operates correctly. Now this cable only goes in one way. It has a little notch on the back of it to make sure that it goes in correctly. But all you need to do is basically fold this cable and not quite in half and let it fall into these slots. Then from there, push it down into the connector, and those little brackets on each side will clamp onto it automatically and hold that in place. There's also an R-shaped buckle that you need to install right here, and that holds that cable in place. And again, the easiest way to be able to install this is just fold this cable in half and slip it into its position. And then you have one screw that's going to hold it in place. And again, that is drilled and tapped. To put this cable in place, you are going to need to move the print head all the way to the furthest extent. And that way it's going to give plenty of room for this cable to be able to move and at the same time be held in position. So make sure you do that. Otherwise you might just have this a little bit too tight and that print head is not going to go all the way to its furthest point. So that part, very important. Don't skip that. Now when you do that correctly, the connectors to be able to plug into the stepper motor is right there in front of you, ready to be able to plug into the stepper motors. Again, everything's pre-wired and ready to go. So while I'm here, I might as well go ahead and plug these in. Now there's only two connectors for this X-axis, and they're very clearly marked. But in addition to that, these plugs are different size, so you can't plug them in the wrong position. The stepper motor connector is underneath. You just have to look under there and make sure it's oriented correctly and plug it in. So now let's move on to the stabilizing bars. Again, you have a little packet with all the screws and washers for it, and everything is ready to go exactly the position. You have the one bracket at the top where the screw will go through, and it is again drilled and tapped. So all you have to do is just put that screw into its position. On the bottom it's a little bit different. It is drilled and tapped, but you're going to put the screw into the stabilizing bar and then put the washer on the back side. And from there, just line it up with the pre-drilled and tapped hole and screw it in. There is no guesswork and no measurement, and you don't have to align anything. Everything is preset. So at this point, the machine itself is assembled. The only thing that we need to do now is finish connecting all of the wires, and we're going to have to make some adjustments. And that's the most important part that I want to be able to show you. But for now, let's move on to the wiring. On the Y-axis, the cable is right there, exactly where it needs to be. It's already tied with the little tie. All you need to be able to do is just plug it in. On the other side, there's several wires that you have to be able to plug in. Again, they're all clearly labeled, and to make matters even easier, they're different size plugs. So it's virtually impossible to plug this in incorrectly. So it takes just a second to be able to plug in these little plugs, and this operation will be done, and we're about ready to test out this machine. Now I saved the last wire was the stepper motor, and mainly because it was the one at the very bottom and all the rest of the wires were out of the way, and it made it being able to plug that in very easily. There is a wire that you need to plug into the filament detector, and again, everything's pre-wired and it's sitting there waiting for you. So we can just plug this in now, and that takes care of all the wiring. Now we need to be able to make some adjustments. Look at this print head. See how it's shaking and loose? Now that happens during shipping because it's set at the factory, but things will happen and things will move. Now at the bottom there are two eccentric nuts, and these eccentric nuts allow you to take the little tool, the wrench that's provided in the kit, and just turn those ever so slightly. And what will happen, that will tighten those wheels and make it where it will snug the printer head up and get it secure. And it doesn't take a whole lot, and you want to be able to do it a little bit at a time to be able to adjust each of the wheels so there's even tension on the wheel to the track that it's running in. And you want to test it out where the wheels takes a little bit of friction, and you can just try to roll it and move it with your thumb and make sure that it's rolling smooth, because it's very easy to over tighten one while the other one is still loose. So again, even tension, take your time, but those eccentric nuts work real well. They are not located on the top. They're just a straight screw that attaches to the wheel on the top side. So this must be adjusted. Now I have to say, when I received the Neptune 3 Pro, I didn't have to do this. So it obviously had a little bit less bouncing around in shipping than this one did. But again, this is an easy fix, but it's something that you need to be aware of so that you can take care of it before you test out that first print, because it will make a mess if you don't. So now that I have that correct, it's time to move on to the bed. When you first turn on the machine, the first thing you need to do is go through the leveling operation. Now there's really two different operations. One is a manual operation, and the other operation is an auto leveling. The first thing that we need to do is be able to do the manual operation and be able to calibrate it with this piece of paper. Now underneath this table, there are 6 knobs that we can adjust. There's 3 on this side, and of course there's going to be 3 on the other side. We need to manually adjust that to begin with this piece of paper. From there, we can do the auto leveling step to be able to have the entire bed level. But this step is a very important step on the Elegoo Neptune 3 Plus, because this bed is so large, you need to manually adjust this to begin with. Now I just hit the manual button, and it says adjust the distance between the nozzle and the bed by turning the nut around the A4 paper to be able to get that correct. Now I selected the manual operation to be able to do the leveling, and this is the next screen that came up. So you have to make sure that you complete this assisted leveling or the manual leveling, and then at each of these 6 points, including the home, so that's really 7 points, and then rerun the auto leveling when you're done. On a quick side note, I like the fact that this controller can be picked up and handheld and be able to move it around. That is really nice. To begin this process, we're going to hit level, we're going to hit confirm, and then it's going to go through the return to Z location. Now at this point, we need to put the paper underneath and be able to move this down until this paper has friction. Now we just have a little bit of friction on it, so that is good. So next we're going to hit the manual, and we're going to confirm and adjust each of these 6 points with those 6 screws. So let's start with number 1. So now we'll slip the paper under and we'll turn the knob until we have that tension there. Now this does take 2 hands to do. So there's the tension. So that is going to be that position. We'll go to number 2. And we'll do the same thing. And we have that one dragging, just creating that friction. So now we'll go to number 3. So we'll do number 3. And now we have friction on that one. So let's go to number 4. The left side now is completed on the manual portion, and I think you get the idea. I'm going to repeat this same exact process now for points 4, 5, and 6. And then once that is done, then we'll move on to the auto leveling portion. And so now I have the friction on this one. So at this point, I'll hit confirm. And now the bed's going to go ahead and heat, and then it'll calibrate through the auto leveling all 49 points. So we'll be able to see each one of them do the auto leveling. And as we complete it, it will check it off and it'll continue moving right along through the process. Now all 49 points have been completed, so now we need to be able to do the Z offset. So at this point, we're going to hit confirm, and you can see the values down here. And we're going to hit confirm, and now we're going to make the Z offset. We'll slip the piece of paper underneath, and we'll raise this up to begin with. So now that we have it raised, I'm going to change this to a smaller unit and slowly go down until I have that friction again. Please do not skip the Z offset. This is very important. And now it's just barely touching. So now I have that friction. So now we have that set. So then we can exit out of this, and we're ready to be able to start our print. Now I want to point out one thing. I have not loaded the filament at this point, but the bed leveling is completely done and that portion is ready to go. Now it's time to add the filament, and we're going to use the extruder, and we're going to use the loading process and make sure that the filament is in and flowing as it should. Now, of course, this looks a little bit crazy, but this is actually an important step. You want to make sure that that filament is coming through, and no, it's not going to be sticking to the bed, but it is going to make a nice little pile of filament, and it will stop on its own. So don't panic when you see this come out and think, oh my gosh, what's wrong? Nothing's wrong. This is what's supposed to take place. The most important thing, make sure you clear this out of the way before you start the print. Now that that's completed, I'm going to hit print. And now let's insert the TF card. Now I'll insert the TF card right here, and it will go in just like this. There we go. And then we'll hit confirm. Unfortunately, there's only one test print in here, and that is the little Buddha. And yes, I've printed this before, but since it's here, let's go ahead and we're going to print it again. And the only model in here is the Buddha, so we'll hit that and print this model. We'll hit confirm. And now we can go through the steps and it will print. That's what the little Buddha is going to look like. And the only thing I need to do is remove the filament from the print head and the bed itself. When you do this first print, there are several things you want to look for. You want to look for the quality of the print itself. You also want to look at that brim and make sure that it is securely fastened to that bed, because if it's lifting up, that can be a problem. Now this is almost finished. You can see it's 77% of the way through, so it's nice being able to have these controls right here in front of you. Now as we're approaching the end, again, it's still looking real good. I know there's been a number of comments where people say, well, gee, the test print always prints good. Well, from the comments that I have read, that's not really true. People have run into quite a few problems with this little test piece. And it's important to be able to run this test to make sure that all of your calibrations were done correctly. The most important thing is to get that bed level to begin with, go through that auto leveling, and please do not forget that Z offset. That establishes the position of that print head in relationship to your bed, and that is critical for successful printing. I really do enjoy watching these prints come from just a little string of filament to a 3D object such as this. It's a very rewarding feeling to have this happen. Now, one of the things that I am doing, because I know you guys say, oh my gosh, you're just doing another Buddha test print. I have several items that I'm designing right now that'll help in the workshop. Plus, I'm looking at downloading the chest pieces for a chess set that I think is going to be a lot of fun to be able to print. And you're not going to want to miss out on that one. So by all means, don't forget, if you haven't done so already, hit that subscribe button and the bell notification next to it. Now this little guy is all finished. Buddha is done, and he does look fantastic. So it's time to get him off the test bed and get ready for the next project. I want to thank everybody for watching today. I look forward to seeing each and every one of you in the shop real soon. Bye-bye. By the way, I absolutely love having a 3D printer in the shop.